important to this. So anything that you have to say, really jump in at any time so we can have that good, um, active discussion. And so, as way of an introduction, Owen, is there anything you want to say? Anything you and your team want to say before we dive into this?
No, we're happy everybody showed up and we're excited to get this started.
Okay, fantastic. So, I'm sorry, I've got a new group request there. So, with that having been said, let's just dive in. And I'm not going to run the presentation mode. I'm going to run this kind of review mode, so that it's just I think easier for everybody to see, and it'll be easier for me to jump back and forth as maybe we're doing some editing. So, with all that, we've kind of gone through the introduction. If you would do me a favor so that we can track this and so that Owen can track this, if you would do me a favor and enter your name, title, and who you're representing in the chat so that we've got a good tracking of who it is. It's a great way for us to sign in. We can also run a log and see who signed in, but sometimes those email addresses aren't really descriptive enough for us to tell who's who. So if you would do me that favor, I would be most grateful. The second thing is, remember that I am really happy to run any questions at any time. So if there's anything you want to know, anything you want to talk more about, or if you, excuse me, want to talk less about something, just let me know. Now, I do want to apologize. I just got over a case of COVID, and it was surprisingly terrible. Having had it a couple times before, this one was the worst by far. So if I start coughing up through the presentation, I promise you I'm going to make it. But I do want to give you that apology because sometimes that's not so great on the camera. And the other apology is I've been sequestered in my basement here to keep away from, well, all my family because I certainly don't want to give this to anybody. So, I'm locked in my basement securely away from everybody. So, with all of that having been said, what I'd like to do is review those goals and objectives. Now, the key thing to remember here is the relationship between goals and objective. And I know this is a little bit of over explaining, but heck, sometimes I get confused with this as well. So, what I want to do is I want to talk first of all about the hierarchy. And we want to remember that goals provide the overarching direction, the way that we want to go. And objectives break down those goals into actionable steps. So we'll set an overarching goal, of which we have 6 of them, and then we set objectives that'll help us reach that goal. Now, some of these goals, the idea with setting them up is that they may never be completely achievable, and that's perfectly okay. It's something that we want to keep striving towards. Now, the objectives, we need them to line up with the goals. We don't want to have weird objectives under the goals. We want to make sure that they line up and they need to be directly related. So there has to be a flow through there. And then finally, the objectives really help us measure how we are working towards that goal. Some objectives we can mark off, some we may have to keep striving for, but it really gives us a way to measure those goals. And that's one of the things that we want to make sure of. Now, in the plan itself, we write an entire section on the goals and objectives, of which is included how we are going to track what goals we are close to achieving, what objectives we've achieved or are close to achieving. So we put some strategies in there on how we're going to do that. And the idea is we put general strategies. We're not trying to hamstring anybody on how they're going to track them, but we put the general strategies of how we think we're going to track them in general. So, with all of that having been said, let's go ahead and take a look at the goals. And we want to start off with goal 1. Now, what I want you to notice is goal 1 has not changed since the last time because the goal is protect life, health, property, and the environment. And that really is the definition of hazard mitigation plan. And if we're doing it right, we're always going to strive to meet that goal. Now, for the objectives, we have 4 under this. The first being eliminate or minimize disruption of local government operations caused by natural hazard. That goes towards protecting life, health, and property because, again, local government operations really feed into that very much. We want to increase the resilience or protect and maintain infrastructure and critical facilities. Again, that goes to the protection of life, health, and property. We talk about community lifelines with that, with the idea being that having our response capability able to withstand events really allows us to continue providing those community lifeline services. We want to improve the understanding of the location, causes, and potential impacts of natural hazard. The more that we know, the more that we understand how those hazards can impact us, the better we can achieve the goal. And then finally, the objective is develop or improve early warning emergency response systems, communications, and evacuation procedures. Now, what FEMA will tell you, and they're probably pretty darn close on that, is that's not really a mitigation objective. Remember, mitigation is long-term actions that make the community safer overall. Objective 4 there is really a response action. Now, I like putting it in there because I think it's valuable, but it's worth the discussion there to understand that that's a response potentially versus a mitigation action. So the question I present to you on goal 1 is, how do you feel about that? Is that worth continuing having a goal in our plan? Do the objectives work us towards achieving that goal? And are there any other objectives that we want to either add, or the current objectives do we want to modify in any way? And the easiest way to do this is for you to simply shout it out. Unmute yourself and say, hey, Matt, this is what I think, or this is what I want to do. It's hard to real time monitor that chat, especially when I'm sharing my screen here. So if you got anything you want to say, heck, the easiest way is just to say, Matt, this is what I got. Hey, I'm going to take your silence as you feel pretty good about that goal. Let's move on to goal number 2. And in goal number 2, we've got increased public awareness of vulnerability and enable the public to mitigate, prepare, and respond to and recover from the impacts of hazards and disasters. Now, again, I think that that's a good goal. For mitigation, we want to make sure that we're really hitting the mitigate and prepare for versus the respond to function, but I think it's a good goal. Now, before we had one objective in there, which was educate the public on the risk. But I thought that maybe we want to broaden that a little bit. And you'll see that we've added 2 new objectives in there. The first one is to improve community engagement and outreach. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that, yes, we're educating, but we can continue to improve our outreach efforts. It doesn't have to be a one-time thing. It can be woven into the fabric of what we're doing. The second one is improve and advertise public access to hazard information. Again, we've got a lot of stuff that is available for folks to understand their hazards, not least of which is going to be this hazard mitigation plan. And so really to go along with the education, we want to improve the outreach and we want to point them in a direction. So we added those two objectives in to really augment and work towards goal number 2. So the question again is, how do you feel about goal number 2? How do you feel about the old objective? And how do you feel about the new objectives? And are there any objectives that you think we should add there?
Hey, Matt, this is Brian Shinoni. We didn't unclick fast enough, but the first one we like looks good, and I like the objectives. The second, goal 2, I really like the improved community engagement and outreach. I think that's definitely a viable piece, and then we have been missing that in the past. So I like that. And then the new objective, both new objectives to me, I think hit the nail on the head on that for us.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. So I'm glad we expanded that a little bit. Is there anything that we're missing there? And again, we're improving that outreach. And one of the things we want to do here is underserved and vulnerable populations. Again, we really want to hammer that home, that we recognize that there's some disparities in the county. And we want to recognize those disparities and, I guess the word isn't really embrace them, but we want to recognize that they're there and see that there's different ways that we can communicate here. Okay, fantastic. Onward and upward. Goal number 3 is reduce the adverse impacts of disasters on the economy. Now, we've got 2 new ones in there and 1 old one. The old one is consider the impacts of natural hazards on future land uses within the planning area. And again, that's just solid hazard mitigation planning 101. That is, we recognize that there are some areas that may be more prone to hazards. And if that's the case, what we want to do is we want to maybe restrict land uses or put more codicils or codes or regulations on developing in those areas. That makes absolute sense. We added 2 new objections there. The first one is to strengthen disaster resistance and resiliency and resiliency of major employers. So one of the things is we recognize that we've got a lot of leverage that we can maybe put on the public, but there are major employers there. And it may be good of us and maybe sensible planning on us to include them as much as we can on the idea of being more resilient because they really are the economic drivers of the county. And so again, what we said is, hey, we want to talk with these folks, the employers, and say, here's what you can be doing to make sure we keep those economic engines running. And then the second one is partner with private sector to leverage resources. So again, what we recognize is money doesn't grow on trees, but we can get these partnerships going, which I think you guys are now doing a very good job on, but we can continue to expand that to make sure that we're working with our private sector partners to not only leverage expertise, but potentially leverage funding and level skill sets as well. So how do you all feel about goal three? Worth keeping in? And how do you feel about those objectives?
Hey, I would like to see objective three, maybe say private and nonprofit sector,
Yeah,
because we do
absolutely.
have a lot of nonprofits that work directly with businesses. The Siskiyou Opportunity Center,
Yeah,
um, they do a lot of business outreach, and so does the Siskiyou Economic Development, whatever their official title is. But
yeah,
they both do a
absolutely.
lot of private sector or yeah, private sector outreach, and so I think leveraging them, it would be good to mention that.
100%. That's a great idea and something I didn't consider, but you're absolutely right. Our nonprofits do a lot to keep those economic, excuse me, that's a hard one to say, those economic engines firing. So absolutely, I've got that in there. Okay, fantastic. Let's move on to goal number four then. And that's improve cooperative emergency management capabilities among all entities. Now, the only suggestion I would say, heck, we can leave it as entities. The idea is, hey, let's all work together better as a team. And I think we do that very, very well now. We've got two objectives in there: sustain reliable local emergency operations and facilities during and after a disaster. Now that is kind of a retread from objective one, which is increase the resilience of our critical facilities. It's a retread of it, but I don't think that that's a bad retread. Again, that's one of the things of hazard mitigation planning is make us more resilient. The second one is encourage coordination among all jurisdictions, adjoining communities, and stakeholders. And again, I like that one very much because, as we all know from the hazards that impact us, they don't have the good grace to respect political boundaries. It's not like a wildfire is going to blow up in Wairika and then stop at the city borders and not go anywhere else. And so the better we can work together as a team, which is the point of doing this multi-hazard jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan, the stronger we all are. And so I didn't think there was really anything to do there or any objectives to add, but I am open to add anything or tweak anything if you've got ideas.
Possibly a third objective about ensuring, education and training opportunities. Something about that, just to make sure that, you know, the county and all the other jurisdictions have the knowledge to respond to and recover from disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point. One of the things that we put in the plan is, one of the consistent areas of improvement that we always put in there is really training folks on how hazard mitigation planning works, but beyond that, and really crucially, is how those grants work. Because one of the things we found universally is, grant funding tends to be kind of a little bit murky, a little bit opaque. And so one of the things we hammer in the plan is it'd be great to train everybody how to apply for and maybe more importantly, manage those grants. And that's something we would do in collaboration, not only with the county, but with the state and even with FEMA as well, to put that training opportunity out there to learn the ins and outs of grant application and management. So absolutely, that's a great objective. Okay. Oh, I jumped ahead there. Goal five. For goal five, we have facilitate the development and implementation of long-term, cost-effective, and environmentally sound mitigation projects and programs. So again, that hews very, very closely to the whole purpose of hazard mitigation plan. So I think that that's a very good goal. Now, again, we have two new objectives in there and one old objective. I'm not sure why I didn't put those in order, but I apologize about that. So the old objective is retrofit, relocate, or elevate structures in high hazard areas, including those known to be repetitively damaged. Um, I think that that's a great goal. That goes to repetitive loss and severe repetitive loss properties, I believe, in particular. Those, flooding and severe repetitive loss and repetitive loss properties tend to be a known fixed location. And so the mitigation of those is something that I think is very important. And it's what we consider to be, while costly, low hanging fruit, because those floodplains don't really tend to move. The majority of the rest of our hazards, it tends to be a little bit more haphazard in their placement, right? It's hard to detail where a severe storm is going to really impact us, or detail where a wildfire is really going to impact us, because they can blow up in myriad locations. Now, we put two new objectives in there. The first one is implement mitigation programs that promote reliability of community lifelines. And so again, we want to hammer those community lifelines, and that really goes back to goal one, which is protect and mitigate against these things. And having the reliability of our community lifelines, that response capability, we think is really vital. Objective two is incorporate effective mitigation strategies into capital improvement projects. So again, as we're looking at our available funding, and we all know money doesn't grow on trees, it'd be great to say, when we're doing these capital improvement projects, what can we do to ensure that we are hardening them as much as possible? What mitigation techniques or ideas can we include into these so that we're building structures that we know are resilient? And I thought that those two new objectives really talk about those long-term, cost-effective mitigation projects and programs. Any thoughts on any of those?
So for after the word mitigation in the goal and in objective 1 and 3, I would love it to also say mitigation and climate adaptation. I
Yep.
think that with the new guidance, there's a high likelihood that if we don't have climate adaptation in at least one of these goals, it's going to get kicked back.
That's actually pretty good, because goal number 6 is actually a new goal. And goal number 6 is continue to adopt and enact climate adaptation measures to help reduce the long-term risks and mitigate against the impacts of climate change. So that's actually a brand new
Perfect.
goal we put in there, because we recognize, really the impact and the importance of considering climate change in those. In fact, for each hazard that we write against, we prognosticate as to what climate change is going to do to those hazards. Some it will not impact at all. If I think of earthquakes, climate change doesn't do a heck of a lot to earthquakes, or at least the science doesn't say so yet. But if we look at things like drought and wildfire, 100% there's an effect on that. And so we talk about that and recognize the really importance of, when we're prognosticating about what those hazards are going to do, we really want to talk about climate change. Now, with this, we've added two new objectives: advance understanding about the relationship between climate change and natural hazards, and develop hazard mitigation and climate change adaptation policies that prevent long-term negative effects on the environment. And so we purposely added those in there to address that. Are there any other objectives concerning climate change that we should consider putting in here?
Maybe something around planning and implementation of projects.
Yeah. So objective, consider I'm the worst typist on the planet here. Consider the potential impacts of climate change when conducting, how about conducting capital improvement projects?
Yes, and maybe long-term planning or something like that.
Yeah, and we can wordsmith these, absolutely, but I just wanted to put these in there to sort of get us going and make sure that we're all pulling in the same direction, because these objectives and goals will really shape our mitigation action items. And what we want to do is, when we start talking about those mitigation action items, one of the new things, and you guys did a very good job on this on the last plan, but one of the new things that FEMA is really stressing is that for every potential hazard that can impact your jurisdiction, we need to have at least one action for that jurisdiction that addresses that hazard. And so climate change really is going to impact us in a lot of ways. And so we want to identify those long-term projects. And when we're writing potentially new actions, we really don't want to put that with a lens towards climate change.
Public outreach.
Yeah, public outreach on climate change. So do an educational, continue to educate the public on the impacts of climate change.
It gets folded into number two, but I think it ought to be specific enough with attention to this.
Yeah, absolutely. To continue to conduct public outreach and education measures on the impacts of climate change on identified natural hazards. And we can again wordsmith that a little bit, but that kind of gets us in the ballpark there as to what we're looking to do. And I think that's a great one, right? I mean, again, the more messages we can get out there about climate change, the more we can beat that drum, the bigger difference it makes. So I absolutely like that. Okay. So those are our 6 goals. We've done some modifications to some. We've kept the 5 that were in the plan before. We've kept those in there to keep working towards them. We've added some new objectives, some new benchmarks that we can measure as we're working towards those goals. Now, my question is, out of all of these, have we achieved any of these objectives? Are there any that we're working through, and I'll jump us back to the beginning here, that we feel we've really moved the ball on? Because again, we want to claim any successes we have. And one of the things we want to do is look back at the old hazard mitigation plan and say, how much have we moved the ball? What have we done that really has moved us forward and made us as a jurisdiction and really made us as a unit safer? So on goal number 1, have we really moved the ball on any of these?
Hey Matt, this is Brian. I would say really for that, just to improve the understanding of location, causes, and potential impacts of natural disasters. I would say that would probably be that would be the move right there. I mean, we've identified our areas that are most at risk. We understand our severity report. So that would be the one that's, I would say, checked, but unfortunately we're not doing much for it, right? We're not stopping it. The mitigation side of it has been challenging.
Absolutely, because again, with the way things are changing, those areas are going to change, unfortunately. But what we'll say in the plan is, hey, look, we feel that we've moved the ball on this through, GIS mapping, through working with our public to understand their views on that. So we can absolutely say that that's a success.
And then our second one on that is the emergency response to that, the early warning emergency response.
And how we move the ball on that.
Yeah, we've moved that through basically upgrading our systems, upgrading our basically the way we do it, the way we through Genesis and Zonehaven and some of the other systems upgrades that we used prior to the last hazard mitigation plan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can say, hey, look, we've developed some new warning and notification systems. You guys are probably using social media a lot more effectively to push that message out.
100%.
So absolutely, that's another ball move. And what we want to do is social media. We want to categorize these successes. So fantastic. On goal number 2, how are we doing on public awareness?
So I think again, Brent Shinodi, looking at that as a whole, well, it's a new one, but the education.
So what I would ask is, are you guys doing?
We can look at this meeting right here, and we've seen
Yeah.
throughout the communities increasing their vulnerability through having like community resiliency officers, understanding that part of it to be able to have a whole emergency management encompassed throughout the county, which has been, I would say, we definitely moved that ball.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can call that as a success, and we can say, hey, look, we've got community resiliency officers now that really are engaging the community in hazard mitigation, or in understanding and codifying the hazards that can impact us on a jurisdictional level. Okay. Goal 3, reducing the adverse effects of disasters on the economy. How do we feel about that? Have we moved the ball there? Have we done, especially on the old objectives, have we done any new zoning ordinances, building code ordinances? Has the building code been updated since the last plan? And that's one of the sections we're working on now, is to understand, what the changes in building codes are. One of the things I would say here is potentially, as a ball moved, would be continued enforcement, continued stringent enforcement of building codes and zoning regulations.
I would say
Yes,
also
no.
since the
Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
sorry, I would say also since the last plan, there's now the Siskiyou Climate Collaborative, which
Yeah.
is developed, and so they're kind of working towards. They're within the Economic Development Council, and so they're kind of working towards in strengthening the economy against climate change. And so there's like a new partner in the works.
So they're collaborating with, we'll just put collab with the Economic Commission.
Yeah, they're kind of under them.
Okay. So again, we could say that we've got, now we're integrating the potential impacts with the Siskiyou Climate Collaborative with the Economic Commission, so that when we're looking at economic things, we're understanding really the potential impacts or long-term impacts of climate change on that. That's another great ball move. And you guys right now, do private partner collaborations, don't you?
Yes, we do. This is Brian Schneider. Yep.
Brian, so who are we doing those with? You're doing it with the oh heck. COVID fog is hitting me, but I know you're doing collaborations now with private partnerships to sort of get the funding and move things forward. So we'll just put collabs. Okay. Let's talk about goal number 4. Improve cooperation of emergency management capabilities among everybody. I think that you guys have done a really good job of that. And, these are, I think, are objectives that we've kind of really pushed that ball forward on all of them, with the exception of maybe these training opportunities. And that's a new one that we identified. And again, I think that this one we could probably do more to really open everybody's eyes up about how we do grant funding through FEMA, whether it be HMGP, the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program funding, or BRIC funding. Really, I think that we could probably push the ball on that a little bit more with those education opportunities. But I think these two, you guys have definitely moved the ball in your collaboration. And really all we're going to say with that is, hey, look, we're doing our mitigation planning together because we recognize that we're stronger together. Sorry, my notes here probably drive some of you crazy. I am not such a great typist, and B, it's easier for me to just put little notes in there. Okay, goal number 5, facilitate the development and implementation of long-term, cost-effective, and environmentally sound mitigation projects. So again, one of the things that we're going to ask you as we start working towards developing our mitigation strategy section, which will be a little bit further down the line, is what have you done? Right? What projects have you completed, whether they were identified in the hazard mitigation plan or not? What projects have we done that have made us stronger? And one of the things that will hit absolutely is that when you do a new build or even a renovation project on any of your facilities, or really on any facility, it immediately becomes more hazard resilient because you have to meet new building codes. And there's a lot of hazard mitigation provisions in those new building codes. So again, any of those projects that you've done have really moved the ball on this. And that's one of the things that we're going to ask you when we start revising those mitigation action items is, what have you done? And so again, I think this might be one where as we move on, we'll identify some ball movement on this as well.
This is a great one. I want to talk on this one earlier, but looking at like the objective, not the new one, the retrofit relocate. Critical infrastructure, I think, needs to be in there. We look at some. McLeod is not on here. They have some water that basically is water areas that are affected by climate change. So looking at critical infrastructure and the sustainability of that for McLeod to basically continue on and push forward on that. That's going to be where we need to look at as well. But yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the things that, again, with those annexes, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, those jurisdictional annexes, we'll try to tease out that difference in vulnerability from McLeod to certain hazards. And whether it be their infrastructure is in known flood areas or, low-lying areas, whatever it may be, we can try to tease that difference out and understand what their risk is differentiated from everybody else. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, moving critical infrastructure, if you get Build Back Better America funding to do bridges or, rehabilitate roads. That's one of the things we'll absolutely want to consider in there is what do we need to do so it is more resilient? Okay. So with all of that having been said, and I apologize, I'm going a few minutes over here. What I want to tell you is this. This does not have to be the end all be all of our goals. If while you're sitting there after this meeting, you're thinking, what would be another good goal? Let us know because we can absolutely include those in there. Say, hey, here's a goal and here's some objectives we were spitballing, and this is what we think about it. And we can then workshop that out with everybody 100% because really there's a lot of noble goals we could put in here. Now, to finish up, because again, I apologize for going over here, but I really do love the good discussions with this. I want to tell you about the progress we made because that's always a great question. Where the heck are you guys? So what we've done is for the main plan, what was called Volume 1, Sections 1, 2, and 3, we've completed those and they're ready for review. So we sent them off to Owen and his team to do the initial county review. Once they're done with that initial county review, we can release them to you, our jurisdictional partners, for review. We finished Section 7 as well, our planned maintenance section, talking about how we're going to maintain this in the future. It's one of the things we kind of keep an eye on from the get-go is we're going to write this great plan. We want to make sure that we've got the processes in place that'll help us keep it maintained during the next 5 years. So we've got that pretty well locked down at this point as well. Sections 4, 5, and 6, hazard identification, capability assessment, and mitigation strategy are in progress. What we're really hammering right now is Section 5, the capability assessment, so we understand what we've got, what capabilities we have. Once we've done that, we'll really start hammering and finishing up Section 4, our hazard identification and risk assessment, so that we understand the lens of our capabilities through the hazards, right? What maybe lessens our vulnerability or increases our vulnerability for those hazards. Once that's done, excuse me, we'll finally finish up with our mitigation strategy. So we'll have a full understanding of our capabilities and we'll have a full understanding of those hazards and vulnerabilities. And then we can generate our action items and our strategy and say, we understand what's happening here. If someone were to hand us a bag of money and say, make our community safer, here's how we would sensibly use that. Now, for those of you on earlier on the call, when I was talking with Owen, what I said is this. Our goal is to hammer out Volume 1, the main plan. And what we want to do is we want to substantially shape that out and get that looking and performing how we want to look. And then based off of that, what we're going to do is we're going to take Section 1 and we are going to simplify it down and write the jurisdictional annexes based on that. What our goal is to make Volume 1 look like Volume 2. And we want to make your jurisdictional annexes look like Volume 1. And again, what we want to be mindful of is we want to be mindful of unnecessary duplication. And so by finishing one section and understanding the weight of information in there, we can then take your jurisdictional annexes and write them and say, we don't need to say this again. It's in Section 1. Here's the information you need for your jurisdictional annex. And we think that that will make a more streamlined plan, a more usable plan, and a more impactful plan for you. And so that's the strategy that we're working on right now. We're making great strides in all this. We understand that the plan expires now, and so we don't want you to be hanging out there any more than you need to. And so we're really putting, some pressure on getting this done. So our next steps, I jump here to our next steps. is this. We're going to continue drafting our plan. We're going to continue working on this. We're looking for a second meeting to discuss those mitigation action items. We're hoping in early October. Again, we want to shape out our plan, start working on our annexes, and understand what our risks are through the lens of our vulnerabilities and our capabilities. We're then going to move on to the review period where you guys can review the entire plan. We're going to do a public review period where we release the plan to the public. And again, we'll release some surveys in there so they can do that online. And then we're hoping to finalize things and get things out to Cal OES in December. Now, again, that is, we'd like to compress that as much as we can. And so any way we can compress that, we will, and we'll let you know how that compression works. But this is a realistic time frame. I mean, this is, if we look at this, this is a 6-month time frame for a hazard mitigation plan, which is a pretty compressed schedule already, especially when we're looking at those annexes and really trying to understand that. Any way we can compress it, we absolutely 100% will. Okay, so that's what I've got for you. And I do apologize for going over. I know that I went over my time, so I'm grateful for you. I just always like to flash my information out there because there's nothing secret or proprietary that we're doing. We encourage any of you. If you want to talk to me, that's my cell phone number. That's my email address. I'm genuinely happy to talk to any of you about anything hazard mitigation related. If you want to know where we are, what progress is, if you want to take a peep at something, we're genuinely happy to include you. So anytime you want to reach out, please do so. The only time I don't get back to you almost immediately or answer your phone call is when I'm in a meeting like this, or quite truthfully, when I'm knocked out with COVID, like I was last week when I'm lying on the couch, really watching a lot of Olympics. So even then, I'll probably take your call. It just won't be as energetic as it should be. So if you need me and want to talk to me, I'd really love to hear from you. So that's what I've got. Owen, anything else you want to finish up with? Any of you or your team you want to finish up with?
No, we just like to thank everybody for taking the time today. We appreciate it. Thank you, Matt.
You bet. And for those of you who are still online, if you haven't put your name, your title, and who the heck you are representing in that chat, hey, just let me know. Just go ahead and pop that in there so we can see it. So we give you credit where credit is due. And again, if anybody missed the meeting, if you're a community resilience officer and you happen to know that an adjacent community missed a meeting because heck, they couldn't herd the cats or make things work, tell them to reach out to me. I'd be genuinely happy to review this for them in short order and bring them up to speed. So other than that, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and thank you for sharing your time with me. Get the heck out of here.
Thank you very much.